everyone, thanks for watching. Today we're going to talk about the idea of superstrings and how we can use the idea of superstrings to look 13 dimensions deep into ourselves. So without further ado, I give you third dimensional superstrings and beyond. So the basic premise of everything that I'm going to talk about today sort of begins here, where it says that everything that is actually consciousness, and so you are consciousness, you're part of consciousness, so you're part of everything and everything's part of you from that way of looking at things. Now this is just a little bit of an overview of how my model works. If you watched my 12 Dimensions of Consciousness video, this might seem a little bit familiar. But since we're talking about superstrings today, superstrings are something that we're going to define, so we're going to give a definition to them. So in this picture, if you can see my cursor there, over here in first dimension, we're just going to call that shape there a superstring as a definition. And then what the model says happens here is if we form that shape in second dimension, superstrings have the ability to both combine with each other and make copies of themselves. So they can go either way, split apart or join back together. And so in this picture they're splitting apart and making copies of each other. So we started with one. In second dimension, like everything about second dimension, we now have two. And then in third dimension they form this cube here, so we make enough copies to make a third dimensional object. And then when we evolve that one more dimension into fourth, what we have is many versions of this cube. So over here in fourth dimension we have many versions of what we have in third dimension. And so this is how we're going to progress through the dimensions today with the concepts that I want to try to show you. And so once again, what we need here is a place to start. And some people would argue with you that there is no such thing as superstrings if you're looking for them in physical matter. And I probably wouldn't disagree with that. So we're going to define superstrings as an idea here if we're going to use it to look at 13 dimensions deep into ourselves. And so one definition that I could give a superstring, and Stephen Hawking may kick my ass for this, but I believe that a rudimentary definition from superstring theory of what a superstring is a one-dimensional ring of energy that makes up everything that is. Now I'm okay with the idea of the superstring being a ring of energy as a concept, but what I want to show you here next is this as an idea, because it's what I'm going to use in essence to define superstrings, and that is a repeating loop of experience. Because ultimately then, if you asked me what superstrings are made of in this way of defining them, it would be exactly this. So they're made of you in essence, and your experience, and so anything that you experience as a repeating loop would potentially qualify as a superstring. Now again, in second dimension, if I start with a superstring in first dimension, what happens in second dimension is they can either make copies of themselves and so become two or more superstrings, or they can combine back together, and so two superstrings can combine, or two or more superstrings can combine to form a single superstring, either a more complex superstring or a bigger superstring, or even two superstrings that came from having been copies of each other could potentially join back together to become a single superstring. But so here in second dimension, as I'm indicating here, basically they can both combine and separate, and so potentially differentiate. So in other words, this superstring might no longer be exactly the same as this superstring, even though it came from this one making a copy of itself. The copy doesn't have to be an identical copy to form a second superstring. And so here we are at a representation of your very first superstring that you would have formed in this incarnation, and that would have been when you formed your very first cell. So it actually took 3 components for you to enter this reality, because it would have taken both the sperm cell and the egg cell to join together, so both the male and female components, and then the third component would be you, and you would have been the one who took control of and ultimately, apparently, arranged the pieces of those elements into a single, what is interpreted as fertilized cell. And so again, first dimension, you formed a single cell. And then in second dimension, the first thing you did was make a copy of that cell. So the original cell divided into 2 cells that were may not have been any more identical copies, but at any rate, this is exactly what happened was cell division began, and so 1 cell became 2, and then 2 cells became 4, and those cells were all becoming part of a bigger something as well. So just as second dimension suggested that superstrings do, you did as well. Now we need to take just a minute to talk about a word here called frequency, because this applies to everything that we're talking about here in terms of superstrings, especially third-dimensional superstrings. And frequency is a word that I hear used a lot out there that doesn't always necessarily seem to be meaning exactly the same thing. So we're going to just define a little bit about what frequency means to me and what we're talking about here. So specifically, frequency in this reference is referring to cycles per period of time. So in other words, if this line represents time right here, and these are cycles, then there are so many cycles in this period of time that happened, and that is the definition that I'm going for at the moment here of frequency. So here's yet even a closer look at what we're talking about, or what I'm talking about when I'm using the word frequency in this instance. And this is where something is cycling on and off. So in this part of the loop, in this part of the experience, something is turned on or something's happening, an event is occurring, and then once we cross the threshold here, the something, whatever it is no longer happening. So in this instance it turns off, or there's some other event or experience occurring, and then here it turns back on again, and then it turns back off again, and on and off. So again, this is just specifying what we're talking about when we mean frequency. And so during the cycle that the something is on, during the cycle that the event is occurring, we have in that piece of it, in that cycle of it, a beginning, instant, and an ending. So again, we're heading here for a loop of experience where because that's going to repeat later in the unfolding of events if we continue the frequency. And so when we're talking about something that has a beginning and an end, we don't want, if we want to understand this, we don't want to represent this in a linear or analog fashion where we have a beginning and an end that look like this. But instead, what we want is back to our idea of a superstring, so a beginning and ending that looks like this, where the beginning and the end are actually potentially the same place, where the end is a new beginning in potential of a something else, or a repeat of the same something. So again, anytime we have a repeating loop of experience here, we're talking about something that I'm calling a superstring, and a definition that I'm forming by suggesting it. So when we get to third dimension and try to look at a cross-section of what a superstring might look like, when I tried to draw it, it looks something like this, as if there was a ball traveling around and around, a ball of energy, let's just say, traveling around and around in some sort of a hollow tube. And so that ball is going to reach this place in its journey over and over and over again. So once again, by my defining wherever this starting and ending place is, doing exactly that, defining both a beginning and an ending of a cycle, so in beginning and ending of a loop of experience that's happening with this ball of energy. And so in the example that I'm using today, to get and understand a little bit about third dimensional superstrings, we are using the example of a song, so a piece of music. And the music itself here is made of components that I know of as notes. So each note is actually a superstring in and of itself. The notes are going to have this repeating cycles of on and off, because this note right here is on for a certain period of time, and then it goes off again as other notes come on and go off, and then this note is going to show up again here, and it's going to show up again here and some other places in the song. And each note also has a vibrational frequency, so this note is a C note or whatever note it is, so it has a particular tone and a particular frequency. And then the notes combine, so this superstring combines with other superstring notes here to form patterns. And then the song itself is made of patterns that combine, so you've got superstrings within superstrings, all within the superstring of a song. And so ultimately the whole song becomes a superstring, again made of these smaller strings, and repeats an entire cycle. And so what happens here is when I'm playing the song or hearing the song or singing the song, whatever it is, while I'm having that experience, I'm doing exactly that and experiencing the superstring of the song. Now once the song is over with, the only way I have to experience the song again is to replay the superstring, ride the ride all over again, and start the loop all over again. And so that would look like this. If this is a superstring of my song, the song somewhere has a beginning and an ending point and travels that loop, plays the song, plays the notes, repeats the patterns, all superstrings within a superstring I'm calling a song. And so travels a loop of experience. And then that song is represented here as that superstring that forms a part of and joins together with any other superstrings that are all part of what I hear, experience, and know as music. So this is just another way to illustrate the way that superstrings join together to form bigger or more complex superstrings. So here in life on this planet, we experience a superstring, and I'm going to use the word every day, and the superstring is in fact what we call a day. And a day happens to be the repeating of a cycle of the planet as it spins in its orbit exactly one time. So every time the planet gets to a certain place, by the way that I'm defining it, and I could pick any spot of the cycle that I want, but it happens that we pick a time frame here we call midnight, so the darkest part of the rotation as it faces the star we call the sun is both the beginning of the new day and the end of what becomes yesterday. So the same place becomes both beginning and end, and the repetition of a cycle that I could call a day and I can define as a superstring that I experience. And so if I suggest that I could define a day as a form of a superstring, a repeating loop of experience, that day also has components, so smaller superstrings that make up what comprises that day. So these smaller components are repeating cycles like the night and day side of the planet as it faces the star. Biorhythms, I eat breakfast every day. I experience a form of consciousness I call waking consciousness, as I'm experiencing as I'm talking to you now, and I experience a form of subconsciousness every day that I call sleep. And I also, for example, experience music if I listen to it during my day. So one of these superstrings could be made of music that I heard that day, and then that superstring is actually then made of whatever pieces of music that I played or sung or listened to during that day. And then the planet spins on itself here to make up superstrings I'm calling days, and then the planet itself orbits the star, and one complete orbit around the star is a superstring that I could define as a year. And in the course of an incarnation, we have a finite number of years, so many times around the star. That's going to make up a single lifetime. So anything, and this really extends prior to birth, because it goes all the way back to the first dimension when you formed your single cell. So you actually spent part of your superstring in the womb as a developing embryo and fetus, and then were born as an infant. But it was still all part of the same journey that I would call the superstring of a lifetime or an incarnation, and ends at an event we know of as death. And so this lifetime superstring, death is not an end so much as the completion of a cycle when I look at things in this manner. So something I would call a life cycle, and so something that it would be suggested could be repeated over and over again is this life cycle superstring. And so since we're talking about third dimensional superstrings here, we're starting with a small superstring, the example that I use today of the single note of a song, and the notes combined in other superstrings of patterns and chords and whatnot to form the song. The superstring of the song became part of a bigger superstring I call music. Music became part of a bigger superstring I would call a day, and the day became part of a bigger superstring I would call a year, and then the years became part of the bigger superstring I'm calling a lifetime. And so here at lifetime, at incarnation, when I try to go any further than that and step into the fourth dimension, something changes. And I reach a place where if I've left at the confines of a single incarnation, which I did from third dimension to step into fourth dimension in this definition, I reach other possible versions of myself. So it means it was possible that, for example, I repeated a life cycle superstring many times over as a different version of myself and or a different form of consciousness here on the earth. And so if it is that you happen to watch my other video, 12 Dimensions of Consciousness, you might remember that from my model, time actually extends into the fourth dimension. And so the fourth dimension takes us to, if there is such a thing, the edge of the universe itself. And so that would mean that I may have or have experienced yet other possible versions of me, not from the earth, but from other places out in this universe that we might call alien. And so it would also mean that this representation here, this gray alien and this earth human and this reptilian, could actually all be part of the same soul. And so all different versions of the same self in that manner. So I could potentially in fourth dimension then have many versions of myself that I have experienced or may be simultaneously experiencing or will experience, not only here on the earth, but in any other place out in this universe. And I can only suggest to you, because it's from this way of seeing things, that what this universe is, let's just say from spirit, could be called a game that we're playing, and the game of the universe is to complete the universe. And that's what this universe is a bunch of things, if you will, all putting themselves back together. So it's something that looks like it took itself apart into trillions upon trillions of pieces and is in the process of putting itself back together. As I suggested, that you are in the third dimensional reality is a self who is indeed split into three parts that Freud named id, ego, and superego, and that I know of as light traveler, relay, and shapeshifter. And so that would mean, for example, if I do indeed have a version of myself that's existing, or has existed, or will exist as this gray alien, he would also have, if he's in a third dimensional reality, if he's in this universe in space-time gravity, he also has three parts to himself that would be the same three parts as me. He would have a light traveler, a relay, which would be his subconscious, and his shapeshifter, which would be his ability to inner observe himself. Certainly here on the Earth in three-dimensional reality I have the same thing, and so would this reptilian have also three parts of his or herself. And so if the game here is to complete the universe, your part in that, the part that you can do, the part that you can play, is to complete yourself. Nobody else can do that for you, nor can you do it for anyone else. So if I go all the way back here to my third dimensional self, and this third dimensional self here on the Earth within this lifetime is doing exactly that, and he's learning and reassembling the parts that make up who he is as a self, and then I have fourth dimensional versions of me doing the same thing, and then ultimately these fourth dimensional versions are merging potentially into one fourth dimensional self. That might be a definition of the game that I'm playing, and again reassembling the parts of myself. And so it would seem that the game here in this universe, not only with the stars and planets, but with us as well, was to basically take yourself apart, forget that you took yourself apart, forget how to put yourself back together, and then go through the experience of both remembering that you're taken apart and remembering how to put yourself back together. And so since the fourth dimension takes us to the edge of this universe, if we try to go beyond that into the fifth dimension, what that's going to do is it's going to take us to a place that I know of and think of as the spirit realms, or back to spirit. And again, if you watched my 12 dimensions video, then you might remember that the spirit realms encompass the fifth, sixth, and seventh dimensions of us. And again, that's from this way of interpreting. And so you might also then remember the definitions that I suggested of the fifth, sixth, and seventh dimensions. The fifth dimension being a place where choice manifests. So it would have been potentially from the fifth dimension that I made the choice to enter this universe and choose a version of myself and a place to incarnate, rearrange the pieces of that self and that body, if you will, all the way down here to where I'm spinning on the surface of a sphere I call a planet. Let's just get back there. And when we go beyond fifth dimension into sixth dimension, the sixth dimension became a place where thought manifests. And if we went beyond that into the seventh dimension, it became a place where desire manifests. And so what all this means, I have represented here. And I need to take a moment to explain this to you because I have a lot going on here. But here I would have the superstring that I've been talking about that I'm calling a life cycle. And so the superstring from a single incarnation into this universe. So let's just say this is the superstring that I'm riding as I speak to you now on this video. And this is suggesting that it all started here with desire. that I wanted something, whatever that was, to learn something, to experience something, to complete something, to play something out, whatever it was that I wanted. And after I knew what it was that I wanted, and again remembering that I'm up here in spirit at this point, I thought about it for a while. And after I thought about it for a while, I made the choice to make the plunge into the universe. And again, from the 12 Dimensions video, you might remember, in order for anything to happen in this universe, it has to first be possible. So I would have made the choice and passed through the fourth dimension of possibilities to ultimately land here in the third dimension. And so in this universe have incarnated and then rode this little ride here of this universe and this single lifetime to the point where ultimately I will experience the event of the superstring known as death, pass back through the fourth dimension at that point, seemingly, to re-enter the spirit realms and come all the way back here to what was at one point a beginning, and so have formed this potentially repeatable loop of experience. And so the question arises here, if we could look and see, if we could, let's just say, take a cross section of that life cycle superstring, what was it made of? What were the components that made up that life cycle superstring? And so let's just try to take a look at what that might be. And so I have that represented here. Again, this is a cross-section of the three-dimensional life cycle that, let's just say, it has completed itself. And this is what I found that made it up, and you might remember this from my other video that's called Unified Field Theory, a Model for Time, and the three parts that would make up my experience in that place would be memory, emotion, and imagination. So the memories that I recorded, the imaginings that I interpreted, and the feelings that I felt. But the other thing that I find here that was also recorded was the dark piece of reality itself. In fact, it was the reason why I needed to form imagination to begin with, was because my mind was trying to make sense of a reality that contained a dark piece. So I had a picture that had a hole in it that looked a lot like this. And so since I couldn't see part of the picture, the way I had available to conceptualize that was to imagine what was in there, and then recorded that as memory, and then ultimately felt feelings accordingly. And if it was that I had, let's just say, imagined a different picture than the one that I imagined, or perhaps you can identify with this at a time in your life when you had imagined and so interpreted a certain something to be true and real, recorded it as memory, and then reacted accordingly and felt your feelings. If that were to change, if I were to gain a new piece of information or reinterpret that picture, I find that my feelings about the very same event have changed. And so if we continue to explore what's contained in that cross-section, that cross-section of this third-dimensional life cycle superstring, when we talk about memory, first of all, I certainly have what I consciously remember, but also what I would have is what I subconsciously remember. And in fact, if I have three parts to myself in a space-time gravity reality, which apparently I do, my light traveler, my shapeshifter, and my relay, then each one of those three parts of me actually might have a different version of the story of what I experienced. And so it would mean that my subconscious memories might even be complex there, that there might be more than one other version of the story. And it's not news that we record subconscious memory. In fact, we're in a constant state of recording both conscious and subconscious memory, and we repress memories and feelings all the time. It's part of our normal course of events here. So again, remembering that we're looking at this from the fifth dimension to try to look what ultimately was in the superstring, but looking at it from having completed the superstring, we would be able to potentially identify and retrieve memories that went subconscious or were otherwise repressed. And we recorded our imagination, so what we imagined happened, or our interpretation of events. And again, we needed this because we had the dark piece. And so remembering that here as well that the dark piece contains what actually happened. And there was something that actually did happen. We just couldn't see what it was. And so that is most likely different from what you imagined or interpreted to be. So it means we may all be in for a surprise someday when we get to see what was actually in the dark piece of reality, and what actually happened versus what it was that we imagined or interpreted had happened. And then also contained in here again the emotions that went along with the interpretation of events that I chose and recorded. So my feelings as well. And so, again, we're still talking about memory here, but in the 5th through 7th dimensions, and also known to me as the spirit realms, I would then potentially have what I consciously remember from the superstring, potentially what I subconsciously recorded from the superstring, and then also what I would now have is my unconscious memories. And so something that is truly unconscious to me from here in the lowly 3rd dimension is actually in the dark part of me as he, she, or it currently exists. And so again, from the 5th dimension, I would have the potential to remember things that from here I will be completely and totally unable to reform or remember as part of the 3rd dimensional experience. And so what we ultimately have right here, if we go back real quick to this superstring that we were just talking about, that was of the single lifetime spent in my incarnation in this universe, in this case on this planet that we think of as the Earth. Here that superstring is of this lifetime that has joined together with any other superstrings that I might have of experiences from this universe. And so again, those could be anywhere else in the universe, as well as here on the Earth, that I may have unconscious or even subconscious memories of from my vantage point now. From Spirit, I would have full access. From Spirit, I would potentially have full access to remember all of my experiences from this universe. And then this superstring combines and forms together a larger superstring that I might call the totality of my spirit. So this has taken me all the way, in fact, here to the 9th dimension, and the realm I called in my other video of 12 dimensions of consciousness, I named all it is. So if this is my experiences from all the universe that are in this superstring, and this is just this lifetime that formed part of that, that superstring is now here and formed together with experiences that I might have from any other universes that I have visited or experienced, as well as any other spirit realms. Let's just say, who knows what else there is to be experienced or visited outside of a manifested universe. But my totality of my spirit then would have all of his or her or its experiences available. And again, I'm representing it in this way in terms of superstrings. And then this superstring here in the 9th dimension, the totality of your spirit, once again combines to form an even bigger superstring that takes us all the way through to 12th dimension, and a superstring that I'm naming Prime Creator here. You might remember this as well from my other video, if you choose or prefer the word God or Source as well for this. And so here is the superstring then that would be the totality of your spirit, and that superstring again contained all of the experiences that you might have had, not only from this universe, but any other universes or any other realms that you've experienced, added back together with the superstrings from any other spirit beings or any other forms of consciousness that formed superstrings in this or any universe or any realm. And then this superstring of us as a prime creator once again forms an even bigger superstring, because in this experience what we found ourselves in from the model was a 12-dimensional existence, and hence 12 dimensions of consciousness. And it's possible that we've taken that ride before, that we've many other times from a prime creator ridden the ride and played the game of a 12-dimensional version of ourselves and formed universes and spirit realms and whatever else there is to form in a 12D experience. And then this superstring becomes part of an even bigger superstring that I know of as many prime creators. And so that 12-dimensional, the superstring from here, that was all potential 12-dimensional experiences that we may have had, be having, or will have, in whatever way you think of that, became part of this superstring and all went to here, and joined together with the superstrings of any other rides we've taken that were other than 12-dimensional. So let's just say it is that we have taken ourselves apart before from ourselves as prime creator into an 8-dimensional version of ourselves, or a 16-dimensional version of ourselves, or a 26-dimensional version of ourselves. And so it is at this point that in the 13th dimension in this model, the total number of dimensions actually becomes infinite here, because it would seem that there is potentially an infinite number of possibilities of versions of us that we could form all the way here from many prime creators down through prime creator to spirit and into whatever other experiences that we're having, somewhat dictated by what the choice was that we made here of what game we're all going to play together. And so that's all I have for you right now today, was to take us here to the 13th dimension using superstrings. So I would ask you, if you know somebody that might enjoy or benefit from watching this video, to please share it with them. And other than that, for now, this is David Roberts signing off once again. Please visit my website. Please read my book. Please play my game of cards. It's here to help us learn and evolve and grow and heal this planet. Okay, so that's all for now. Over and out.